Hi, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this session on transforming physical events into digital events. My name is Rita Cidre. I'm a marketer and I'm a Fiverr Learn instructor, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our panel of amazingly talented event marketers today. They will be sharing their journeys of how they transformed physical events into amazing digital experiences in 2020 and beyond. So I'm going to quickly introduce each of them, and then I'm going to let them speak for most of our session. So first off, we have Rachael. Rachael is joining us from Provo, Utah, where she's the head of events for Lucid. Prior to that, she worked in both events and integrated marketing functions at Qualtrics and Instructure. Her 2020 physical to digital event, they tried to move Lucid Chart Connect events to a virtual platform and found that they were cannibalizing an existing motion. So I'm sure that we'll hear more about that later. Our next panelist is Stefany Blinn. She's based in Santa Barbara, California, and oversees a team managing more than 200 customer-facing events a year at a company called AppFolio, which is a very popular cloud-based software solution for property management and real estate investment. If you have ever worked with a real estate agent in the United States, I guarantee you that they use AppFolio. It's a very popular tool. Steph is passionate about delivering world-class event experiences and bringing a brand story to life via physical, virtual, and hybrid events. Her 2020 physical to digital experience, shifting AppFolio's annual customer conference from typical in-person attendance to 1,000 plus people in Santa Barbara to a digital format. So huge feat that, again, we'll be discussing later. And then finally, we have Beth McIntyre. Beth is calling us from Jasper, Canada, where she works remotely as the head of community at Bevy. Is that how you pronounce it, Bevy?
Yes.
I probably should have checked with you before. At Bevy and CMX. She oversees the engagement strategy and structure of all of CMX community spaces, and she built and runs the CMX Connect program. Her 2020 physical to digital experience, moving CMX Connect from an in-person distributed events program with more than 50 volunteer-run chapters to the virtual space. So a wealth of experience in the room today. Thank you all for being here today and joining us for this conversation. We're so happy to have you. I'm going to start with a very high-level question and just get the ball rolling. So obviously, all of you guys successfully, or maybe not successfully in some instances, moved events into the digital space last year. Let's talk a little bit about the process and maybe just share one big aha moment or big learning that you had. And I'm going to actually start with Rachael, since she mentioned cannibalization and talked a little bit about some of her challenges already. So Rachael, tell us about migrating experiences to the digital space for Lucid.
Yeah, of course. So Lucid Chart Connect, just for a little bit of context, are opportunities for us to get our community together of users and really to do some product training. So they're half-day events where we typically will feed people breakfast, we'll have a keynote, maybe a customer story, and then we'll bring a product education trainer up and then let them kind of take the reins and teach people more about our products. So early on last year, we decided, okay, let's try to take this experience digital. And we literally took what we did physically, minus like obviously providing, swag and food for people, and we made it digital. And after that experience, we realized, our product education team is already running these training webinars, and that's a motion that's been existing for a long time. And not only were we cannibalizing that, but we weren't providing as concentrated type of content for people. And so I had this, I guess my aha moment was that gone are the days where you can know what your event platform or portfolio or whatever it is for your company is going to look like years down the road. And you can't just take an event and when it finishes say, okay, this event is done, now we're going to tweak these couple things and make it a little better next time. You really have to look at an event top to bottom and say, is this event as a whole even worth continuing in this new space, in this new reality, and with the technology that we currently have in front of us? And so it's a challenging time to be in the events industry, but I also think it's one of the most fun times because I think the industry is going to emerge a lot stronger than it has been in the past and with a lot more tools and resources and knowledge than what we've had in the past. So,
out of curiosity, what did you guys end up doing? Did you end up sort of like canceling those events or moving them to a completely different format?
Yeah, great question. So we ended up just putting them on pause for now because we realized the benefits of what we were getting from an in-person were not, at least right now with current technology, transferable to a digital experience. And instead we've spun up some different type of webinar streams that allow us to take some of those other pieces of content like our keynotes or our customer experiences or thought leadership content and to highlight those in a more segmented way rather than just focusing on trying to put all of those things together like you would in an in-person event.
Yeah, I think for sure, having been at a lot of in-person events where it's the sort of small setting and you get to ask personal questions or very sort of get in the nitty-gritty about a product and understand how it might or might not fit your business or what you're looking for. I think that level of intimacy can get lost in the digital space, especially when you have events that are reaching a bunch of people. And you might have a webinar where there's thousands of people listening in. I imagine, Stefany, in your case for AppFolio, like having run 200 events a year, I imagine a lot of those must have been, to a degree, smaller, intimate events. Did you guys pursue switching those over to digital? And did you find that you had a similar experience to what Rachael described or something different?
Yeah, it was funny because when Rachael was chatting, I was kind of nodding along like, oh yeah, that we found something very similar with particularly with our kind of roadshow series. We do a customer, it's kind of designed for customer retention and adoption and future services and growth. And we typically are in market at least 2 to 3 to 4 sometimes times per month, engaging with our customers face-to-face pre-COVID. And we did the same thing. We tried to take that roadshow series and bring it, all of the elements of it into a virtual space. And we had the exact same response where we were kind of cannibalizing our own webinar and training programs. And frankly, they were doing it better than we were because they'd been doing it for years already. And we were just kind of trying to put the pieces together. So we have effectively shelved that program for the near term, just because we couldn't quite get the formula right to make it work in a virtual space. And we pivoted and really leaned more heavily into other types of programming. I think that was certainly an aha moment for our customer event series. One of our biggest aha moments as far as, what lessons we learned early on was finding the right supplier and better partners to be able to kind of up-level our game real quickly. And understanding that some of the supplier partners that we used in the physical event space weren't quite as adept in the virtual space as we needed someone to be. And so being able to quickly go out and source new suppliers in that space in a very short time frame was, I think, one of our biggest early lessons learned of like, oh, we gotta get on it. We gotta go meet some people and make some connections and bring in some new vendors.
Yeah. When you were looking for new vendors, what were you sort of trying to have these vendors do specifically? Sort of try to recreate a more in-person feeling in the digital space or something else?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And even from the production side, right? We have historically kind of managed event production in-house and relied on an AV company to provide the physical items that we need to bring an event to life. And we quickly learned that company hadn't really done any work in the virtual space pre-COVID. And so it was a real quick pivot to find someone who we could bring on board who had that existing virtual event experience, or at least online event experience, to help us kind of reiterate our programs into those spaces and building some new relationships in that area.
What does the program, from your mind, what was a sort of success story, or did you arrive at a place where you're like, okay, this is a successful format, and what made it successful?
Interesting question. I think, yes and no. Did we find that success? In some cases, we really did try to map out all of our pre-COVID event programs spanning the customer and prospect audiences and kind of map them to what does this program look like in a digital environment. And like I mentioned, we just shelved some of them because we found that they didn't translate. And we really threw all of our effort into moving our annual customer kind of user group training conference into a virtual space. And I think we executed that fairly well. We had, fortunately, a lot of lead time. We had about 6 months of lead time to be able to do that. And then we threw some of that effort and budget into building a net new virtual event program that we were able to go out and find sponsors and partners and industry speakers and kind of come in hot right in, in the early times of COVID. And I think we hosted that event in early May of last year. So we got, we kind of jumped on it pretty quickly. We got our virtual ducks in a row, if you will. We got a platform, we got some technology lined up. And we were able to come to market relatively quickly with a brand new program that only lives in the event space. So there were no preconceived notions about what it would be. We got to kind of define it and build something new and spin up this new experience and kind of try some new things and figure out what would stick. So I think that was successful in the way of, when you've never done it before, it's kind of like, oh, everything you do, it works, and you can figure out, that we would do that again, we wouldn't do that again, et cetera. And we're going to redo that V2 of that event coming up here in about 2 months. So we're excited to see some of the learnings that we got from last year's version of that net new program and how we can bring that to market and maybe we're hopeful for 10,000 industry registrants this year.
Oh my God, that's big.
That would be success for us. Yeah.
Really big. Okay, so if I kind of had to summarize what you and Rachel discussed in terms of aha moments, I think for me it would be number one, the concept of the pre-pandemic concept of smaller, more intimate events, maybe regional events, typically where you had many in a year and very directly expose your product to a small set of customers. Really tough to transition that into the digital space. So many of those have been paused or shelved in favor of much larger events where you're able to reach a larger number of people. That's A. And I loved your comment, Steph, about the sort of mindset shift from, hey, as an event marketer, I'm going to figure out how to turn this physical event into a digital one, and just saying, you know what, I'm just building a digital event. I'm not trying to move one thing from one place to the other. I'm just starting something from zero. So Beth, I love that your title, in your title and in your role, you're both events and community, and you found success in building a sort of larger event digitally, where you also were able to maintain a semblance or a sense of community. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your role in community building and how that translates into the digital space?
Totally. Okay. So yes, I'm the head of community at Bevy and CMX, so I get to kind of oversee the entire program. Community is first and foremost like our bread and butter. That's what we do. We provide a community space for people who are building communities. So it's kind of a fun inception program that I get to run. The CMX Connect program was our events program within the community. So it was distributed, which meant that we have 80 volunteers who are running this team who actually host these events on our behalf. Like I said, it started in person, so we were spread around a whole bunch of different countries all over the world. People were hosting events for their local communities. And then, like everybody, in March, things kind of turned upside down. For the most part, in the beginning, I kind of, similarly was like, okay, our in-person events program is dead. That's just how it's going to be. It was fun while it lasted, but there's just no way that this kind of program is going to continue throughout this pandemic. Yeah, so volunteers run the different chapters, which is so amazing and so cool to see this passion that comes from these community builders who are hosting events on our behalf. And so then when we moved to this virtual world, a lot of them kind of, took off. Some of them had to close, of course, because, the pandemic, there were a lot of things going on for a lot of people. Other hosts were able to really change their chapters and run with them. We had our chapter in Madrid specifically started to invite people from all over the world to their events. And they started to invite speakers from all over the world to their events. So they got to reach this huge audience. Anyway, so it was just a really cool show of resilience and passion from our events community to move to a virtual space and to kind of leave in person, not on the shelf forever, but okay, we'll come back to you when the time is right, and maybe a hybrid approach or something. I think everyone's just kind of ready to see what the future of events is going to look like.
Yeah. Great. So I guess it's in a similar vein, same question, and I'll start this time with Steph. Obviously challenging times, innovation, like that's usually the silver lining of challenging times. So what innovations do you see in the event space, maybe for yourself, but also more broadly, that were brought upon by the pandemic in 2020?
I mean, I think the list is long, honestly. I think for me personally and professionally, I think one of the things that the silver linings, if you will, of virtual events being the result of kind of this shift is the degree of kind of customer behavior and attendee insight that we get from shifting to a virtual platform. I mean, we can see everything from how many times someone logged into the platform, what pages did they visit, what was their time, duration time on those pages, how many clicks did it take them to get somewhere. We overlaid Drift chat onto we use Drift for a lot of our inbound leads anyway, and we actually created a separate instance of it and overlaid it onto our event webpage for two of our larger events actually this past year. And the amount of insight that you get from that, I think we realized how some of those touch points could be replicated in that way, and you could really give that unique one-to-one customer experience virtually. We kind of took it upon ourselves to start our Drift chats of like, hi, I'm Stefany, I'm a real human, what can I help you with? And I think that was kind of fun, and a lot of our customers engaged with us in a way that they hadn't seen at other industry virtual events early on. So I think that was just that level of detail and information and personalization, being able to see from an analytical standpoint on our side how they're engaging with our content, and from I think the attendee side, being able to really develop a personalized experience as well, and not the one size fits all of I go to a lecture hall and I sit with 300 other people, and if it's not interesting to me, I have the choice of either sitting there or walking out, and what other sessions they have so much more opportunity in a virtual space, and we have more opportunities as marketers to be able to capture them with something compelling. So that's kind of my takeaway, I guess, of the good things that have come out of it.
I love that. More insights into the people attending your events, like more personalization, better experience. And it sounds like, ironically, more one-to-one communication, because obviously
in some cases,
easier.
Yeah, in some cases. And it's, we rely really heavily on that customer to employee direct communication at our events. It's kind of one of our cornerstones of how we like to think about how, interacting with customers particularly at our user conference is super, super, super important. It's actually on scorecards for the vast majority of our teams that work at customer conferences. Talking to customers is like part of their job. So the ability to kind of replicate that to some degree was important to us, and it ended up being an even better outcome than we expected. So
Rachael,
there are some good things.
Yeah, there are silver linings. Rachael, how about for Lucid, or even outside of Lucid? Do you find the similar sort of innovation or anything that you would add to what Steph just mentioned?
Oh, one, I was just taking notes on the Drift idea. I was like, oh, that's such a great idea. I'm writing it down. But I think that everything that Steph was saying really highlights what I've noticed as well. Is one of the challenges with in-person events is taking that conversation that happens either on a trade show floor or at a smaller event, and then taking that conversation and all of the value that came out of it and putting it back into the rest of your marketing efforts, so that you can really drive that value for sales. But if those conversations initiate in a virtual event or in a digital setting, that communication, like that pre and post event, and what you're able to do there is there's just so much more you can do. So that's one of the things that I think is really valuable about this transition to digital events, and the fact that the industry as a whole is, for better or for worse, forced to kind of look at this and make these things work. The innovation that we're seeing, like one platform I've been particularly impressed with is Hopin. We notice when somebody is hosting an event on Hopin and we're trying to sponsor a trade show, if they're using Hopin, we're all in. We're like, oh, this is
what is Hopin?
I Stefany's like smiling.
Events marketer here. What is it?
So it's a virtual event platform, but it's the closest that I have seen to actually replicating what happens at an in-person physical event, where you're going from place to place, and the UI is very simple. It's easy to understand, and people can have that one-on-one conversation in an expo booth, and they can have like conversations with just random other attendees if they'd like. It's just, I don't know, Steph, if you want to add anything else there, but I've just been extremely impressed with the value they're able to provide, not only to people holding the event, but to exhibitors and those coming as well.
Yeah, I think it's been super interesting to see the rapid pace of development of, frankly, all of the players in that space. You know, we use Bizbo in-house at AppFolio, but we exhibit at so many industry events that I feel like we've seen, you know, the full menu of all of these different registration and event hosting platforms. And yeah, I think Hopin definitely stands out. I think Bizbo's done a good job. They're all getting so much funding all of a sudden that they're able to rapidly innovate and come up with, you know, just new stuff that they're rolling out once a week and on all of the, you know, newsletter updates. And it's like, oh, we asked for that 2 weeks ago and here it is. It's super cool to be able to see how quickly these things come to market when there's this much demand for new features.
Agreed. Yeah. In fact, I think it goes without saying Bevy's in that space and also doing incredible things. So yeah, step to that point, you're just seeing it everywhere, and it's impressive to watch.
Agreed. Yeah, Beth, on your side, any tools or any sort of innovative like features that you've been using to create digital experiences that have sort of come to your life as a result of 2020 and all the things that happened in that wonderful year?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Bevy virtual conference for all of our big events. And I think that the thing people don't often realize with virtual events is like, you don't have those serendipitous moments on the trade show floor or talking to a sponsor or running into someone you haven't seen for a year. You don't have those moments that just happen. And so the tools that we're using allow us to give more opportunity for people to network and kind of choose their own adventure. So we're using, chat is awesome, general chat, and then the session chat and the booth chat. We've got networking rooms. We have breakout sessions. We do what we call roulette networking, where we like put people into a breakout room just one-on-one for like 3 or 5 minutes. So they have a chance to connect. And we also have different fun topic rooms like dog lovers and cat lovers. So it's less let's talk shop and more like let's fun. And I think one of the coolest things that we've seen is just like how if you can dream it, you can do it. Our event manager, Anne-Marie, for our big CMX summit in the fall, she really took on this like, if I can dream it, I'm going to do it. So we've had ice carving, we've had juggling lessons, we've had cocktail classes, we've had live music, we've had DJ taking live requests. We've just had so much fun at our virtual conferences, and I think that that's what has also really helped us stand out, because when you imagine 300 people listening to a live DJ all at the same time, and they're all in their kitchen or their living room or their balcony, but we're all listening to the same awesome song. That's so heartwarming. That's such a cool connecting moment for so many people that might not otherwise have had that because they couldn't leave their house or couldn't travel or whatever it was to get to your event. So
yeah. I didn't know you guys had done all those things. That's amazing. I will admit that I went last year. I recently had a baby, and when I was pregnant, I went to a digital club in New York. Because I follow these DJs, and they were playing in this virtual club, and I went and I was dancing, and there were all these people it was just on Zoom. There were all these people on Zoom dancing in their living rooms. It was really cool, but to me, like as a marketer, but also as just someone who is used to attend a lot of physical events, I will admit that I have a bit of Zoom fatigue. Like, I get so many emails on a daily basis telling me that there's this webinar with this incredible speaker, but frankly, like, I spend all day staring at a computer, so it's the last thing I want to do. I love the idea of a DJ because I think it cuts through that, like, repetitive offering, which is amazing, interesting speaker, but unfortunately, I just don't want to stare at my computer. I'm wondering, you gave a great example, Beth, for Steph or Rachel, like, do you have any examples of things like that you've seen for yourselves, your organizations, or maybe other organizations of like virtual experiences? You're like, oh, cool, ice carving, or oh, cool, like a DJ.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we layered on early in our pivot to virtual events was Braindate. If you're familiar with the Braindate platform, they existed it existed in real life events as a physical kind of generally a lounge space, and the functionality is connecting attendees and potentially organizers, staff, whoever, sales, whatever it might be, depending on the nature of the event. And giving this kind of very structured networking opportunities and, again, connection points for attendees to talk with each other, to talk with the host organization, whatever it might be, about topics that interest them. And it's kind of it's directed by the audience, and there's kind of a topic marketplace that is populated by users. And they can kind of define what they want to talk about. And if you find somebody in there that you want to talk about that same topic, cool, you can schedule a time to meet with them. And that platform quickly developed an online offering for virtual events. And we went that direction for a couple of our shows. And it's been really, really beneficial, I think, for, again, creating connection points and creating a sense of community and giving people an opportunity to connect with one another about whether it's product related things, whether it's AppFolio, in our case, or whether it's like personal things, like I discovered yoga during quarantine and it changed my life. Let me talk to somebody about it. It really kind of spans the gamut of topics and conversation topics, and I think gives people, again, those serendipitous moments to have those unique conversations that are more than just listening and consuming passive content.
Yeah, it's like the cocktail hour.
Yeah, and I think some people probably brought cocktails to those networking meetings. I don't really know. And they're small group, they're I think we had instances of 5 and instances of 7, and they're capped, and that's it. And you're sharing video and audio, kind of similar to the Zoom meeting, and they're 30 or 45 minutes, and that's that. And it's a moment in time. They're not recorded. You show up, you have a chat, a conversation, and then it's over. And it just adds that nice layer, I think, of true conversation and connection, where you're not just being talked at all day long. You're actually having.
That's so interesting, because we started this conversation talking about how challenging it was to migrate these smaller, intimate events to a digital setting. But it sounds like you sort of nested those inside a larger event. Yeah, I think that's safe to say. And we were trying to solve for a very specific thing at our larger events, that was the networking piece. And that was just the only way that we really found that resonated with our audience. And it works as a nested part of those larger events, but I don't know to what degree it works with that audience outside of standalone. As a standalone. Yeah, that's really interesting. Rachel, anything you've seen that you're like, oh, cool, or anything your organization has done?
I guess the thing that comes to mind for me isn't something we did maybe as part of our marketing efforts, but just something Lucid did for a company activity. They signed up with, I think it's called the Geffen Playhouse. It's a magic show in LA. And the experience was fantastic. So it was, after work hours, but they sent you a capsule in the mail for your magic show that you don't open until, you're instructed to do it. And, I don't want to give too much of the magic away. But the thing that was amazing for me is that we were all on Zoom, logged in, and everybody, all our employees are at home, so they're with their families or significant other or friends, watching around their computer. And they encouraged us to take, to not be on mute and to have our, you had to have your video on to participate. So that was one of the rules. And they would encourage you to come off mute. And, in those moments when you're in a live theater, when typically there's that, wow, that was amazing. You heard people having those moments real time because their mute was off. And it was kind of fun because you were able to connect with your coworkers, but also just with this community of people. And, they said, put on gallery view. So you put on gallery view and you see all these people, experiencing the same thing you're experiencing, but also in their homes. So in some ways it was a more personal experience than what you have when you go to a live theater. And I was amazed that they were able to do that in a virtual setting.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that not more organizations are pursuing the sort of digital event plus direct mail combination.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the cocktail hour. I would not complain if someone sends me a bottle of wine and invites me to some kind of cocktail hour. Just throwing it out there, event marketers.
We're still doing a lot of it, to be honest with you. We're finding that strategy is still working with a lot of our audiences. So we're strong proponents of the cocktail hour and the digital experience with a direct mail piece.
Yeah,
still working for us, so we're still going to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart idea, and it makes it from the perspective of an attendee of a digital event, not necessarily someone putting one on. I think it really makes it stand out. And even if you're still staring at a camera, as Rachel said, you feel connected in a different way to the people that are in the call. Really cool. Okay, so I'm just quickly checking for time. We have a little less than 10 minutes, so I want to shift over quickly to some questions that have come in from the community. Thank you, everyone who submitted your questions. So the first one here is there, and I'm just going to do kind of rapid fire, so each of you guys can just give your answer. And Beth, I'll start with you just so you can prep yourself while I read the question. So the first question here is there a brand that you look up to in terms of digital events?
Oh, goodness. I mean, to be honest, I don't really know, but listening to some of these ideas and some of these things that have come out of this, I mean, I've been doing a lot of research about different companies and programs who are moving from the in-person to virtual and seeing just what they're doing. I've heard of like wine tastings and stuff like you're talking about. I think that it's really cool, just some of the innovation that's coming out of this whole space. And if you Google like virtual event ideas, you're just going to be so overwhelmed with such wonderful ideas. It's hard to choose just one.
Cool. Rachel, how about you?
I think my answer is a little bit similar to Beth. There's a podcast, Stefany mentioned Visible earlier in our conversation, and they do a podcast called In Person, which is a little bit ironic now. But it highlights just incredible event professionals from a variety of different industries. It's one I love listening to because I think there's value, especially in the virtual digital event space, to hear what people are doing in every industry. So even if it's outside of tech and outside of maybe the world I'm living and breathing every day, people are doing really, really cool things. So that's just a resource that I've really enjoyed tuning into.
Cool. Steph?
Yeah, I would echo that. I get a lot of inspiration from podcasts, Visible podcast, as well as Gather Geeks. Biz Bash does a podcast that doesn't come out too regularly that I can tell, but there are oftentimes some great conversations there. I also am on Clubhouse now, which is a whole other black hole, but there are a lot of event production channels in Clubhouse that I think are interesting, and you can kind of follow along and get some inspiration or at least hear what some others are doing in the space. I think I immediately, when you asked the question, Rita, went to kind of some of the more legacy brands that have been around for a long time and have been doing this for a long time since before it was trendy. I worked with Microsoft in the early 2000s, and they were doing hybrid events as a function of business back then, long before COVID was on anybody's mind, but just because of their global audiences. And it wasn't feasible necessarily for all of their audiences to travel to anywhere in some cases. And so, we were doing hybrid events there long ago, before hybrid events were really even on the radar, I think, for most places. So I think there's we are focusing so much on new innovation, and I love that. And I kind of try to be mindful of who are these kind of pioneers that paved the path long ago, and making sure we're not forgetting those lessons learned or ignoring some of the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into making the industry advance to where it has now, and kind of learning from what they've gone through, and some of those legacy brands, and particularly in the tech space, have gone through, even prior to it being super relevant today. So,
yeah,
backwards answer.
Yeah, definitely. We all owe gratitude to the marketers that pioneered digital events, and thank God that many folks invested in this space before it became a necessity. It definitely allowed us to stay more connected to each other in a time where I think we all need to. Okay, Next question from the community. What do you miss the most about in-person events? Rachel, I'll start with you.
I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the first thing that came to my mind is like the, frantic, oh no, something went wrong and you're running from place to place. There's camaraderie and like team building that happens as an events team when those things happen, and just with your team. And when you're, in your home or, your socially distanced location, it's hard to have some of those experiences. So, we try to create them with our team via team activities and just good conversations and not always talking about work-related things. But I think I miss that connection that comes from putting on and hosting events and just being there together as a team through the thick and thin of it.
Yeah.
I definitely agree.
Oh, actually, let's do Steph and then Beth. Sorry.
No, I just had to. I had to give the +1 to that, because that would have been my exact answer, to be honest with you. Like, just when you finish a day on site, quote unquote, in a virtual event, you're like, cool. So I guess I'll go start a load of laundry. It's such a letdown. You miss that team camaraderie that usually you're taking off your shoes with your teammates in the bar at the hotel or whatever, being like, oh my gosh, I need a drink. But here it's just so different. It's such a and I think you miss that the synergy that you get on a team. If it's day 3 and somebody's kind of lagging or having a hard time, you can really pick up other people's energy and boost the whole rising tide raises all boats kind of situation. And when you're alone in your house and maybe your kids are bugging you or Amazon's knocking or whatever, and you're like, oh, there's just too much going on, I can't focus. And that's the hardest part from my perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the energy thing, because I've definitely hosted and emceed and presented at a lot of virtual events. And I think the energy that goes into presenting or emceeing at a virtual event is so much harder than in person, because at least in person on stage, you get that vibe from the audience. You can feel them, smirk at your jokes or laugh at what you're saying. But when you're by yourself in your kitchen, it's energy, 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 and there's nothing coming back. But I will say the thing I miss the most, especially about our big in-person conference, because we're a community-oriented company and because we're building a community for people who build communities, there's no strangers in our audience. So it feels like you're in a place with a whole bunch of friends. I miss hugging everybody. I miss running into people and oh my gosh, I saw you last year, and getting to catch up with people. And so I think it's just hugs and friends. But that goes for everything, not just in-person events.
I'm going to say a lot of people would probably give that answer. Well, I know that obviously we are in a digital format for this event, but I have to say the 3 of you just exude excitement for what you do for a living. And even though we're not in person, you can feel it. And so I'm super grateful that you took the time to spend some time here with us at this conference, and also just share your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom, having been through probably really challenging times in 2020, transferring from a thriving physical events space to suddenly transitioning everything over to digital. So thank you. It was lovely having you. And I hope to see you again, not in a digital event, but potentially in a physical one in person, and give you a hug and a high five and have a beer. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, Rita.
Bye.